What is going on, guys? This is the SS Ultimate Goku back with another video with some unfortunate breaking news. Ted Turner, the former owner of the WCW World Championship Wrestling, has unfortunately passed away. Now, Ted Turner has way more contributions than just professional wrestling. I know that, and I know people talk about that. You know, he founded Cartoon Network, Captain Planet. He was one of the big inspirations to why Captain Planet was created. Um, Founded Cartoon Network, obviously created the cable conglomerate that we know and seen today. He did all that stuff. All those contributions are all great, and I know a lot of people are talking about that. But I specifically want to focus on his wrestling contributions because a lot of people don't really know as much of his wrestling contributions. Most of these mainstream um, places that are talking about Ted Turner are mostly talking about his cable. I want to focus specifically for his wrestling contributions because not many people are making in professional wrestling. Um, Started going as early as I believe as 1973 when he's testing locally for stations. Eventually, when he started really fitting on cable and creating cable, that's when we started seeing Ted Turner kind of sponsor GCW, Jim Crockett Promotions. Um, TBS and TNT were channels that would broadcast for the early cable eras of WCW, or I'm sorry, Jim Crockett Promotions under Jim Crockett, who owned the promotion at the time during the territory eras of wrestling. Then, towards the late 80s into the early 90s, Ted Turner would purchase Jim Crockett Promotions because Jim Crockett wasn't as obviously as rich as Vince McMahon was at the time, and Vince McMahon was really putting a nail on Jim Crockett. Jim Crockett didn't. Jim Crockett had money, but he didn't have as much money as Vince did. And Vince McMahon really was basically threatening the pay-per-view providers that if you didn't available, as in cutting WCW or Jim Crockett Promotions out, we would not carry our pay-per-view event on. So doing to a lot of cable providers at the time. Um, and so because of this really hurt Jim Crockett. And now Jim Crockett was obviously working with Ted Turner because Ted Turner was the one getting out of ratings for the wrestling. So because obviously Jim Crockett Promotions was mostly a Southern, promotion. So because of this, Ted Turner didn't want wrestling to go away. Okay. So when Jim Crockett could no longer afford his company, Ted Turner gave him an offer and bought the Jim Crockett Promotions, and he would rename it WCW, World Championship Wrestling. Ted Turner was mad focused on basically, competing with Vince. Now, it did take him a little bit. He bought it in 90. He bought it in 1990 officially, but it took him a while to kind of get on, that same, basically, it took him a couple of years to get where WCW needed to be to compete with Vince. Because Vince McMahon already had like a 5-year head start in the 80s. Okay, in the 80s, he was doing the WrestleMania stuff with Hogan and stuff like that. So he had already had, basically a head start. So when Ted Turner took over, he owned the wrestling business. Okay, the way he owned WCW was more like a corporate businessman. That was kind of like he was there, but he would sign the checks and stuff like that. But he would allow presidents to run the creative process. So all the storylines and who was going to win, who was going to lose, and all that stuff. WCW president that would do it. that would run the operation for him, but he would sign the check. Seriously competing, was seriously up and had a huge advantage over WCW. The executives under Ted Turner did not want WCW. As a matter of fact, I want to compete with Vince. And he would do that for the rest of WCW's run. WF has created, and if you've watched WCW documentaries that WWE has created with their DVDs and stuff like that, you know this propaganda that he bought out Ted Turner. Hell, even in the famous final WCW Nitro Sino broadcast with Raw and Nitro, having Vince on at the exact same time, when they announced that he had bought the company, Vince McMahon basically said that he bought out Ted Turner. All right, he tried, obviously this wasn't going to happen because they had Shane McMahon interrupt him in a storyline, but he basically said that I'm going to make Ted Turner come down the aisle at WrestleMania 17 and sign the contract that I own WCW. That stuff, obviously that was a storyline for his thing. That was what Vince really thought. Vince McMahon didn't like Ted Turner because Ted Turner did contracts. Every professional wrestler today that has a guaranteed contract in WWE can thank Ted Turner for that. Vince McMahon for guaranteed contracts. He didn't do it. He even said it to people in negotiations. We don't do it. We don't do that here. We give opportunities. Okay? Ted Turner was the first guy in the wrestling business that created guaranteed contracts. And he had more money than Vince McMahon at the time. I'm not sure now today, but at the time, in the 90s, it's than Vince did. Okay? And he would create guaranteed contracts for wrestlers. He would take Scott Hall. He took Kevin Nash from WWE. He gave them guaranteed contracts. And that forced wrestlers in the WWE to get guaranteed contracts. Okay? Because Vince didn't want to do it. Vince did not want guaranteed contracts. All right? Ted Turner started that. Ted Turner was very instrumental to professional wrestling than most people realize. Okay? Ted Turner created live broadcasts on Nitro. Nitro, when it first debuted in 1995, when they went head-to-head with Raw in the TV ratings, okay, their show was live. Raw's show was not live. Monday Night Raw did not become a live broadcast until, I believe, 1999, okay? I think it was mid-1999 when they became an official live broadcast, okay? Nitro, from 1995 till the end of its run, in 2001, okay, were live. Okay, they started the surge of pay-per-views. So the reason, until I guess recently, because obviously now since WWE is doing this, thing with Netflix and ESPN, they only have pay-per-views now every 2 months, I think now. They don't have 12 pay-per-views anymore. But for years, from the Attitude Era to the Ruthless Aggression Era to the PG era until really I think the WWE Network started. And even when the WWE Network started, they still had 12 pay-per-views. They would have a pay-per-view every month. Okay? The reason why there was 12 pay-per-views in WWE was because of WCW. Before WCW started focusing on having pay-per-views every month, WWE would have like maybe 5 pay-per-views a year. Okay? That all changed when Ted Turner started forcing on Eric Bischoff having 12 pay-per-views a year. All right? These are things that Ted Turner innovated for professional wrestling. These are things that littlest things that people don't realize that Ted Turner created. Okay? Ted Turner had huge contributions to professional wrestling. And with Vince no longer owning WWE right now, I really hope there is a push for him to get into the Hall of Fame. Because I think Ted Turner deserves it, man. I think he deserves to be in the professional wrestling, or the WWE Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. I think he deserves it. He did a lot for professional wrestling than most people do. Most of the mainstream people that are covering him right now, they're not going to talk about his contributions about wrestling. They're going to talk about his contributions to cable, CNN, maybe Cartoon Network, but they're not going to talk about the stuff like I'm talking about right now. The guy had a huge contribution to professional wrestling. That's why I wanted to make this video specifically dedicated to the wrestling side of what he did. I'm not saying that all the other stuff he did wasn't spectacular and great, but I know everybody's going to talk about that stuff. I want to talk about the things that not many people are going to talk about him, and that's why I'm specifically focusing on the wrestling aspect here of what he did and the contributions that he did for the sport that a lot of people don't realize. It's second to none, man. He hired Eric Bischoff, who would go on to beat Vince McMahon for 88 straight weeks, nearly 2 years. Okay, he nearly beat Vince for nearly 2 years, from 96 to 98, and even in 98 they were flip-flopping back and forth until the end of 1998 into early 99, when unfortunately Eric Bischoff blew it with the Mankind revealing to be the world champion or winning the world title. As we all know, that was basically what did WCW in, because back then, again, Raw was taped, and Eric Bischoff blew the spoilers of who was going to win that match. And because of that, everybody turned the channel to Raw. And after that, WCW never beat Raw again in the ratings. But for that 88 straight weeks, man, WCW was on top. And Eric Bischoff was a part of that. Eric Bischoff was the president. He was booking the storylines and doing the creative for WCW, but without Ted Turner's money and influence, you don't get there. You don't get there without being the owner and having the money and having the cable resources that he had to make WCW the number one show, or the number one wrestling show on television for 88 straight weeks. And I think that's his legacy. In terms of wrestling. I mean, obviously he has more legacies than that, but in terms of his contributions for wrestling, it's second to none. Guaranteed contracts, 88 straight weeks of beating Vince. One of the biggest interviews he did in 1998, and I'll probably link it. I'll link the clip of it, was him saying that Vince wasn't entitled to a monopoly of the wrestling game. And, he said, you can't do anything unless you get in the ring with them. And he did that, metaphorically speaking. He got in the ring with them, and he did beat him. He did beat him for a while. He is the only person Vince McMahon, him and Eric Bischoff, because Eric Bischoff was obviously a part of that as well. But him under his leadership is the only persons, they're the only people that can say that they got a knockout punch on Vince uh, in terms of television ratings. Nobody had ever come close to beating Vince in the ratings. Okay, TNA tried, didn't work. AEW still's trying and didn't work. Okay, and obviously Vince is no longer in charge of WWE anymore, so that will continuously remain Ted Turner's legacy. Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff will always be the only people I can say that under that company, under me, I beat Vince. Again, guaranteed contracts, live broadcasts, live TV broadcasts of the shows and not be taped for Raw. Was influenced by Ted Turner's Nitro being live, pay-per-view expansion, just great contributions to the world of professional wrestling that are second to none. The things that to this day you think of when you think of WWE were all started by Ted Turner. And I think he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I do. I know Stephanie just recently got in, which is ironic since she got in before Vince McMahon. Vince probably won't be in anytime soon because of, obviously the allegations against him. But I think Ted Turner seriously, there seriously needs to be a conversation about him being in the Hall of Fame now that Vince is no longer in charge of WWE. I am really curious to see if WWE is going to honor his passing too. Because I know when Vince was in charge, he didn't honor the passing of his own president, Jack Tunney. If you remember Jack Tunney, WWE, he had him as the kayfabe president, and he was the real life on-screen Canada operations guy. That's why he was the on-screen WWE TV president. That was a kayfabe position, but he was legitimately in charge of the Canada operations for WWE back in the 90s or 80s and 90s. And they didn't honor his passing. Vince McMahon refused to acknowledge him or honor his passing. Now that Vince isn't in charge of the company anymore, I'm really wondering if WWE is going to honor Ted Turner's passing. Because he deserves it, man. He there should be a tribute for that guy. That guy did a lot for the wrestling, more than people will ever report, more than people will ever actually know. Because of the other contributions that he created, which were also great contributions. But in the world of wrestling, he did a lot for WCW. And I hope he's honored. I hope he's in the Hall of Fame. I hope they put that guy in the Hall of Fame because he should be in the Hall of Fame. I know Eric Bischoff recently got in a few years ago. And Eric Bischoff's legacy is tied to Ted Turner. Without Ted Turner giving him the backing to do what he was able to do for WCW, there is no WCW. The way we look at it today. Obviously Vince created that propaganda that, he bought him out or whatever, which we all know that's bullshit. WCW was purchased by WWE mainly because Ted Turner was no longer in control of the company anymore. It was controlled by AOL because of the WCW, or because of the Time Warner AOL merger was the reason why WCW went out of business. Okay, it had nothing to do with Vince McMahon. Okay, Vince has created that propaganda in the documentaries and the WWE documentaries for years. Everyone knows, any media conglomerate person knows that's not true. But as years went along, people just kind of forgot about it, as most people do, because obviously most media people don't report about professional wrestling. Um, so everyone know anybody that knows the truth knows the truth. Okay, Ted Turner didn't buy it, didn't sell it. He was forced out because AOL took control of Time Warner because of the merger. And that was basically the end. If it was up to Ted Turner, WCW would have never been sold. Ted Turner famously said that as long as I'm in charge of the wrestling business, WCW will never be sold. I mean, the executives behind him wanted WCW to be sold before the Monday Night Wars even started, before even Nitro was created as a TV show. The executives behind Ted Turner wanted WCW sold. Scott Steiner said in a shoot interview that the executives in 1988 didn't want wrestling. They wanted nothing to do with wrestling. Ted Turner is the reason why WCW lasted as long as it did. Because he loved the sport. He loved the stuff that went into it. He wanted that sport to last. He wanted WCW to last. And unfortunately, it was sold, as we all know, for reportedly $4 million. Some people have skewed that number and said it might have been $2 million. But it really is irrelevant because WWE got the tape rights to WCW for really next to nothing when you think about it. Okay, $4 million today would be double. Okay, and considering the tape library that and all the history that goes into World Championship Wrestling, going back to the Jim Crockett promotion days, WWE got a steal for WCW. Okay. Jericho even made the joke. Chris Jericho even made the joke that if he had known how much Vince got for it, he probably could have afforded it. That's how crazy it was when AOL sold WCW because they wanted nothing to do with it. All right, they wanted nothing to do with it. They just wanted to get rid of it. They didn't care. Eric Bischoff tried to buy it. Eric Bischoff tried it. He couldn't get the funds with the investors that he wanted. And that just led Vince being forced to get it. And plus, they couldn't get a TV deal, too. That was the biggest reason why Bischoff's guys pulled out, was because of they couldn't get the TNT TV deal. And they couldn't get another network involved. And so they just basically went to WWE and sold it. Still a very, very unfortunate thing. We recently just obviously celebrated the 25th anniversary year of WCW being sold just a couple months. Now we're talking about the driving force of WCW, and that was Ted Turner. Ted Turner was the man. He's the reason why your favorite wrestler has a guaranteed contract. So just put it that way. R.I.P. Ted Turner. He was the man.